Amen. Amen. So last week we saw David kind of getting called to the carpet there in 2 Samuel chapter 12 as he made a terrible sin in 2 Samuel chapter 11. And chapter 11 is when David decides that he's going to pursue the neighbor lady who was up on top of the rooftop bathing. Her name was Bathsheba, and he just has a little one-night stand with her, and sure enough, she ends up getting pregnant, and he tries to cover up his sin, and the more that he tries to cover up his sin, the deeper into sinning he actually gets, so much so that he ends up actually killing Bathsheba's husband, who is Uriah. He has him killed in battle, and he thinks that his sin has been covered up and that no one knows except for him and Bathsheba. But when you start chapter 12, as we saw last week, we saw that God knew of this sin as well, and God used Nathan the prophet to get David's attention and to let him know that he didn't get away with anything. And the way that Nathan did that by inspiration of the Spirit is he goes, David, I got a story for you. There's a guy and he's got a whole bunch of sheep. He's rich. He's like a king. He's got, thousands of sheep and all these things. And there's another guy over here and he has one little sheep. And this sheep isn't just an animal to him. It's part of the family. It lives with him and it drinks from his own dish. It's like a daughter to him. And this guy comes through town and he's hungry. And the king, instead of offering up one of his own sheep, which he has thousands of, he takes the one from this poor guy and kills it and feeds the guy. And David hears this story and it makes him super mad, and he goes, man, that guy deserves to die, and he needs to pay back fourfold of what he's done. And Nathan looks at him and he says, David, you were this man. You are the one who stole from Uriah, his wife Bathsheba, and you killed him. And David gets called onto the carpet, and David realized that he sinned, and he calls out to the Lord and for forgiveness and all this stuff we looked at last week in chapter 12. And that is one of the major things that separates David as a king of Israel and Saul as a king of Israel. Saul's heart was not repentant. Saul, if we're comparing sin, Saul's sin life was not nearly as impressive as David's. David was a way better sinner than Saul was, right? If you just look at it in that way, David sinned prospectively way more than Saul ever did. The difference is the reason why David can still be concerned as referred to as righteous and Saul maybe not so much is because even though David messed up greatly, David had a heart of repentance and he wanted to get right with God, and he did. And we see that throughout some of the Psalms as he's wrestling in this area of his life. So he cries out to God for forgiveness, and God forgives him in that instant, but there's still a consequence to his sin, and that child that he had with Bathsheba ends up dying, as we saw, and then he ends up having another child with her, and his name is Solomon. He'll be important later on in the story. He'll be the next king of Israel, the third king, and then we learn a little bit more about the battle. Whereas we start here in chapter 13, we're on pause for a little bit of the life of David, and we're going to learn a little bit more about David's kids. And if you are someone who really likes daytime TV, if you really like Jerry Springer, you're going to love this chapter, because this is an extremely dysfunctional chapter that would definitely attract daytime TV people to what's about to take place here, because this is super strange. So let's just dive right in. 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1 says, after this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. So we got three people we're introduced to so far. Absalom, he's the son of David. He's going to come up later on in the story as well, so we'll get familiar with him. Absalom's name, by the way, means his father's peace. Great name, Absalom, his father's peace. Starts out kind of good, ends kind of rough. So he's a son of David. We also have Absalom's full sister. Her name is Tamar. Her name carries the idea of a palm tree, or that of fruitfulness, and she's a very nice young lady. And now we have their half-brother, because they have different moms, because David had a whole lot of wives. So Absalom and Tamar are full siblings, and then Amnon is just a half-brother, and his name means faithful or stable. And the part of the story that starts getting awkward is the end of verse 1, because you realize that Tamar who is, the Bible says, a lovely sister to Absalom, meaning that she's good looking, which, by the way, Absalom was as well. In 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 25, it tells us this about Absalom. It says, "Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him." You know those people that just have like really good-looking kids, right? It's like this is how Absalom and Tamar are. They're just good-looking people, and they're blessed in this way. And some of us have to have our personality compensate for our looks, right? These guys didn't need that. They just had it all going on at face value, and they're just good-looking people. And with that, Amnon, the half-brother of Tamar, starts looking at his sister, and it tells us here at the end of verse 1, it says that Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Now, that word love can be a little deceiving. This is one of the limitations when we're translating stuff into the English language, because we really only have one word for love in the English language, and we use the same word for love to describe a lot of different things. You can love ice cream, you can love your dog, and you can love your wife, but you love those three things in different ways, hopefully. And that's why the English language is sometimes limited. We know in the Greek there's several words for love. Here in the Hebrew, it's more descriptive as well, and instead of love, we can more accurately say that what Amnon has here for his half-sister Tamar is lust. He actually doesn't love her at all, and we're going to see that proved here throughout the story. He doesn't love her, but he's lusting after her. Verse 2 says, "And Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick." I think he was already sick, a sicko, right? He became sick, for she was a virgin, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. Amnon, day after day, this thought in his mind of him lusting after his half-sister starts to consume him, so much so that he becomes physically ill, and it starts to show, and we'll see that here in a couple verses. Well, verse 3, "But Amnon had a friend," and it's more than a friend. We're going to see that this friend is actually a cousin. Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother. Now, Jonadab was a very crafty man, a sly kind of a guy. You know, we could call him Eddie Haskell, right? You ever watch Leave It to Beaver? He's kind of like a sly, kind of crafty guy. This is how Jonadab would be. He's kind of crafty. He's full of bad advice. Maybe you got a cousin this way, right? They're just full of bad advice. They're always there to give you advice, but it's never the right advice. And here, Jonadab gives Amnon some advice when he finds out that he's been lusting after his half-sister. Verse 4 says, "And he said to him, 'Why are you,'" first he makes an observation. He goes, "'Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?' Amnon said to him, 'I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister.'" Well, buddy's not just your brother's sister, right? Because your brother's sister would be your sister. But notice I was trying to make some, distance it just a little bit so it's not as weird. And I get it's his half-sister, but still, right? He goes, "I love my brother Absalom's sister Tamar, and it's taken a toll on me." So much so that his cousin here, Jonadab, could see him, and he goes, "Dude, you're getting kind of thin. You're losing some weight. You're not eating right. You as the king's son should be flourishing." I mean, you have access to plenty, and, even back then, generally speaking, royalty was a little more on the hefty side. And it's like, "Hey, why are you so thin? What's going on in your life right now?" He goes, "I got a problem." He goes, I'm love sick, or we would say lust sick, for my half-sister, and I it's all I can think about, and I can't even eat." And verse 5 says, "So Jonadab said to him," here's the bad advice, "'Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, "Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand." "Oh, you love your sister, eh? Here's an idea," he says. Instead of saying, "Dude, that's whack, forget that. Hey, buddy, that's kind of awkward. You shouldn't be thinking that way." He goes, "Oh, you love your sister. Here's an idea. Pretend like you're really, really sick and lay in bed." Okay, Here's the thing, he doesn't have to pretend to be sick. He is sick, right? We've already seen that in verse 3. He is a sicko. He goes, pretend like you're sick, lay in bed, and tell your dad, Dad, I'd feel a lot better if, my half-sister Tamar could come in here and make me some chicken soup. And then when she comes into your room, then it's kind of your chance to make your move, essentially, is the idea of this bad advice that his cousin gives him. Now, this is very bad advice. What Jonadab should have said to Amnon when he found out that Amnon wanted to be with his half-sister Tamar, he should have told him what Paul warned us about the idea of our thought life in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says this, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to push all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. We're supposed to be taking every thought captive, the Bible says. So as Amnon has this thought in his head of, my half-sister's kind of cute, at that moment he should have said, yeah, but that's weird, so I really shouldn't be thinking this way, and took that thought and put it into captivity. Right? When you take a wild animal and you put it into captivity, what are you doing? You're caging it. You're putting a fence around it. And you take that thought of that lust that's in your head, whatever it might be, and you put it in a cage and you say, I'm not going to let this thing roam wild in my life. I'm going to limit this thought because I know that it's not good. Paul would say this in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22, on this idea of lust, which is what Amnon is struggling with here. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22, he says, flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. And you might be saying, well, Hagen, that verse doesn't really apply to me because I'm not a youth anymore, so I don't have to flee from that. But the implication is flee the same lusts that were there in your youth. So just because you're old doesn't mean the youthful lust still can't come back. And this is one of the only cases in the Bible where the counsel is to get out of Dodge. We learn about the armor of God. We learn about the fiery darts of the devil. We learn about standing our ground and fighting against what the enemy might come at us. All of that is good for us to do. But when Paul is encouraging young Timothy here in 2 Timothy, he does not tell him to fight lust. He tells him to flee it. Because lust is a battle that you actually can't win trying to fight. You can only win it by getting away from it. And you don't just run away from lust. You pursue other things, as he says there in 2 Timothy 2:22. He says, flee youthful lusts, but don't just run away from lusts. He says, but pursue, this is what you should be running towards, righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. Get away from the lust and pursue the list of those things that Paul has there in 2 Timothy chapter 2. This is the advice that his cousin should have gave him, but instead he gives him some poor advice. Now, lust can come in many different ways. In 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 15, John gives us a little overview of a few different areas in our life in which lust can come over us. He says in 1 John 2:15, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now, as he lays that out in verse 15 of 1 John chapter 2, I have written in the margin of my Bible, this is the love that God hates. God hates the love of the world. He says, do not love the world or the things of the world. Then he goes on in verse 16 to say, for all that is in the world, this is what the world has to offer you. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It's not of the Father, it's of the world. And the world, it's passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. John here just makes it clear to his readers in 1 John. He goes, here's the deal. This world doesn't have anything good to offer you. And this is what the world is going to try to offer you. And you can sum it up in these three different categories. And notice two of them involve lust. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. He goes, these things are not from God. These things are what the world has to offer. And he goes, here's why you don't want to be concerned with these things in verse 17. He says, because the world is passing away, and the lusts of it, they're passing away as well. They're temporary. They don't last, as we'll see back in our story here in a little bit. But he who does the will of God abides forever. You don't want to be overly concerned with what the world is offering you, because what the world is offering you is temporary. It's not going to last, and it doesn't really make sense. I mean, if you just looked at it from a worldly standpoint as far as, say, business, you wouldn't want to invest in a stock that was destined to fail. If you knew that Apple was going to crash, you wouldn't want to invest in Apple. If you knew that another stock over here was destined to succeed, that's the place you would want to put your money and your resource into. And he says that's how it works for us as believers. We can choose where we want to invest our life and what we want to let into our lives. That of the world that is passing away, or that of God, which is going to abide forever. Well, here we have a great example in 2 Samuel of Amnon, who is investing in the wrong thing. He's in the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, as he gets this bad advice from his cousin. Verse 6 says, in 2 Samuel 13, it says, "Then Amnon, he laid down and he pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him," this is King David, Amnon said to the king, "Please let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." Dad, I'm sick. So the King David, he comes and he goes, "Hey, bud, what's up?" "I don't know, I'm just not feeling well." "Well, what can make you feel better?" I need some food." "Okay, I'll get one of the servants." "No, I don't want a servant to make it. You think maybe, I don't know, Tamar, my sister, could do it?" King David's, sure, right? David's got no problem with this. And David's sent home to Tamar, verse 7, saying, "Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." "Hey, Tamar, your half-brother's sick. Go take care of him for a while. Thanks." Verse 8, so Tamar, she went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. So she's getting, whipping up some little cakes for him, some little bread, some saltine crackers to make him feel better, whatever the case is, right? Verse 9, and she took the pan and she placed them out before him. "Here's your food." But he refused to eat it. Then Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." And they all went out from him. "Okay, you need some food to feel better." Whips up some food. Here it is. He goes, "I don't want it yet." What's wrong? There's still there's people around. Get rid of all the people. "Tamar, I just want you and me here." That's kind of weird, but okay. So she gets rid of all the people, and now here Tamar is with Amnon in his room. He's laying in bed. She's got the food, verse 9, and she took the pan. She placed them out before him. He refused to eat it. Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." They all went out from him. Verse 10, then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom." Come closer, okay? Not just out on the table, into the bedroom. "Bring the food into the bedroom that I may eat from your hand." I want you to feed me, sis. Okay. And Tamar took the cake which she had made and brought them to Amnon and her brother in the bed. Verse 11, now, when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, "Come lie with me, my sister." But she answered and she said, "No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing." Man, what a strange event. Everyone goes outside. "I'm hungry, feed me." "I don't want to feed myself." "Okay, here's your little cake." That was his chance. He reaches up, he grabs her, and he goes, "I've been watching you. I love you. Lay with me, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, whoa, right? She's just like, this is not good. She tries to talk him out of it. Verse 12. She says, "No," and I like this, "No, my brother," right? She's like, "Hey, don't force me. For no such thing should be done in Israel." This is an abomination. The law of God in Leviticus teaches against this very thing. She says, "Do not do this disgraceful thing. This is not a good thing to be doing." Verse 13. And she goes on, she goes in, "Where could I take my shame? And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel." You're going to ruin your life with this one decision. This is what lust does. It builds up, it builds up, it builds up. You finally get to act on it, and acting on it could really screw things up in the future. And she's trying to reason with him, but as we're going to see here in verse 13, you cannot reason with lust. Lust does not recognize the warning signs. And she's giving him warning sign after warning sign why this would be a terrible idea, but he chooses to ignore it because he's entertained this thought for so long in his mind that she goes, look, you're going to be a fool in all Israel. You're going to bring shame upon me. Verse 13, she goes, now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. What she's doing here, she's trying to buy time. So she goes, how about you ask Dad, the king? You know Dad, because we have the same dad, right? She goes, ask the king, our dad, if this would be a good idea. I mean, if he thinks it's good, he'll give me to you. And she's trying to buy time here. And as we see, this story ends tragically in verse 14. It says, however, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her to lay with her. Man, here we see what is flat out blatant rape in the Bible as Amnon takes his half-sister Tamar and lays with her. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse number 4, it tells us this. 1 Corinthians 13:4, because what Amnon was thinking is that he had loved her, but he actually didn't love her. He was lusting for her, and this verse 14, proves it and how he deals with her. It says, however, he would not heed her. He didn't listen to her. He forced himself on her, and he ends up laying with her. Well, 1 Corinthians 13 tells us, it defines for us what love is. It says love suffers long, or we could say it's patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. It doesn't behave rudely. It doesn't seek its own. It's not provoked. It thinks no evil. It does not rejoice in iniquity, but it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never fails. Great verses, always use them in weddings generally. When you read the context of it, it's talking about actually spiritual gifts and the greatest gift of that being love, which is interesting. But one of the things you can do with 1 Corinthians 13 to see kind of how you're doing as you're walking with Jesus, replace that word love with your name. When you read it this way, it's kind of funny, honestly. Hagen suffers long. Hagen is kind. And you start to put your name in there, you go, how am I doing, right? Hagen does not rejoice in iniquity, but Hagen rejoices in truth. Hagen bears all things. Hagen believes all things. And you're like, okay, I got some stuff to work on. But the point is, those should be attributes that apply to us. But our world today is confused on what love is, most definitely. There's all sorts of stuff that's happening in our world today, and particularly, maybe even just this past month, there's a big celebration onto this idea that people should be able to love who they want to love and all this kind of stuff. But the reason why things are so confused in our world today is because we don't understand what a real definition of love is. And here, Amnon is claiming to love his sister, but he's actually just lusting after her, because if he truly loved her, guess what he would have been? 1 Corinthians 13:4 says love is patient. Love does not force itself on someone. So girls, and I kind of only have one younger girl, so Reva, this will be great, something to take note of. You got some boy in your life, he's pursuing you. Back here in the back too, take note of this. You got some boy in your life, he's pursuing you. I really love you, I really love you, I really love you. Can I tell you something? He doesn't love you, okay? He don't even know what love is, okay? And he's going to say the right things, and he's going to try to force you into what he wants to get out of you, and all he's doing is running his mouth to try to get it. And anyone who's trying to pressure you into doing something that you don't want to do, you can say, that's not love, because love is patient. And if someone really loves me, they're going to wait. They're not going to try to push me into doing something that I'm uncomfortable with doing. And it's especially in our day and age something that young people really struggle with. And there's all sorts of debate in the Christian world right now as to what is acceptable for people to engage in before marriage and what is not. And it's an interesting dialogue to have for sure, but sometimes I think that we ask that question in the wrong way, because generally what teenagers are looking for is they want to know how close to sin they can get without going over the edge. It's like, so what's allowed for me to do with my girlfriend? They might ask something like this, and it's like, well, here's the thing. This is how it was explained to me once, and I think it's a pretty good concept, actually. Your relationship with the opposite sex, you get your first boyfriend, you get your 10th boyfriend, whatever the case might be. You got a boy, you got a girl, whatever, things are getting serious. That relationship is like a vending machine, okay? And in order to get something out of the vending machine, you know what you got to do? You got to put a quarter in. And here's the thing. This vending machine doesn't give you your quarters back. So when you put that quarter in, you don't get it back. So it's like, was it okay for, say, you got your first boyfriend and you've never held hands. Mom, is it okay if I hold my boyfriend's hand? If you want to use that quarter on him, sure. But you don't get that quarter back. You only get to hold someone's hand for the first time one time. So if you want to spend that quarter on that guy, go ahead. If you want to save it for someone else, you probably should, by the way, because the first one's always a dud. Save it for someone else, right? Because once you deposit that and push in the thing, that quarter does not come back. And then it's like, okay, so I can hold, is it okay to kiss? Well, I don't know. Are you willing to risk that quarter that you cannot get back on this person? And that's the kind of mindset that people, particularly young people, need to have when they're approaching this dating world. So anyway, this is none of the logic that's used in this story. He just forces his sister upon him. He lays with her, and then the story gets even worser. In verse 15, it says, then Amnon hated her exceedingly. He lays with her, and as soon as the act is complete, verse 15 says that he hates her. He doesn't just hate her, he hates her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love which with he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, arise and be gone. Wow, this is all he could think about for month after month. If I could just be with my sister. He finally gets what he thinks he wants, and as soon as it's over, he goes, I hate your guts, get out of here. And we're going to see that he kicks her out and locks the door behind her. This is how upset he is. And this is what lust does, because lust is never satisfied. Lust is a big letdown. It builds up, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be great, and then you do it, and you go, that actually was terrible. This is nothing like I thought it was going to be. And he hates his sin, probably. He hates what he's done. He hates her, and it just gets things super complicated. And he goes, get out of here, because now his hatred for her is greater than his lust for her. Verse 16, so she said to him, no, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse than the other that you did to me. But he would not listen to her. Here's the thing, ladies, emotions. Emotions will always get in the way, okay? She starts to get upset. No, you loved me. Hey, no. He got what he wanted. He's on to the next thing. When you finally give them what they want, be careful, because then it's like, what's the point? You know, why buy the car if you can drive it for free, right? So don't be letting them drive it for free is the point, okay? Make them commit. Commitment is marriage, by the way. Verse... where am I here? 16 maybe. So she said to him, no, indeed, this evil of sending me away. Yeah, you can't do this. You can't just throw me out in the cold, because she was a virgin. Now that's gone. Her odds of getting remarried in this culture are very slim. You kind of need to take care of me now, bud. And no, verse 17, then he called his servant who attended him and said, here, put this woman out away from me and bolt the door behind her. Now, notice in verse 17, that word woman is in italics, so literally what he says is put this out. He doesn't even refer to her as a person. He sees her as an object. Put this thing out of here and bolt the door behind her. And this just, again, shows you of the detriment of lust and how it never satisfies, and now he's hating her in a terrible way. Verse 18, now she had on a robe of many colors. Reminds us of Joseph. For the king virgin's daughter, they wore such an apparel. That they would have these clothes that kind of spoke of their purity. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Throws her out and shuts the door and locks it up. Verse 19, then Tamar, she put ashes on her head, sign of mourning, and she tore the robe of many colors that was on her and laid her hands on her head and went away crying bitterly. This is like the worst day ever for poor Tamar. Verse 20, and Absalom, her brother, said to her, has Amnon your brother been with you? But now, hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. She goes running back to their section of the palace. Absalom sees her crying, and she doesn't even have to say it. He already knows what's kind of been going on. He goes, did Amnon lay with you? and she's just crying. And here's Absalom's advice. He goes, don't let this get you down. And you read this, you go, well, that's kind of insensitive. But Absalom is plotting revenge as he's saying this. He's trying to comfort her, but in his mind, he's plotting revenge, and he's going to get it. Well, verse number 21 says, but when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. Man, David hears of what's going on in his palace, and this really upsets him. Here's what's weird about this event in 2 Samuel chapter 13, though. All that David does about this matter is what's found in verse 21. He gets angry about it. He doesn't do anything else about it. And people have some different ideas as to why David didn't get involved. Why didn't David punish Amnon? He could have. The law allowed for it. Why did David not get involved? And many think that David felt disqualified to speak authoritatively on this issue because of his own downfalls recently with lust. How can I look at my kid and tell him this when I just had a guy killed in battle and slept with his wife and all this stuff? And here's the thing, though. This is the trap. This is the lie of the devil that we cannot fall into. Far too many Christian parents today, here's parenting advice from someone who doesn't have kids, so be sure to write this down. Far too many Christian parents today say, man, I know little Johnny's going down a bad road, but I can't say anything to him because I was worse when I was a teenager. Bad idea. Who cares how worse you were? Truth is truth, and you need to let them know that they're heading down a road of destruction. Well, little Johnny's messing around with Mary Jane, a little marijuana, and I smoked a lot as a kid, so how could I say something? You can say something, because truth is truth. You got to call this stuff out, and the temptation, the thing that the devil's going to do in you is bring up your past and your failures and say you're not qualified to speak into this person's life because you're a bigger screw-up than they are, and that's okay because even screw-ups can speak truth. So don't be afraid to look at someone who's going down the wrong road and say, you're heading down the wrong road. David here probably felt like he couldn't get involved because of his shortcomings, but he should have. Verse 22 says, in Absalom he spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. So now Absalom hates him, which makes sense. Verse 23, and it came to pass after 2 full years. It takes some time, but Amnon's sin is going to catch up to him. After 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Now, back then, when you would shear the sheep, it would be a big old celebration. It would be like branding today. It's a social thing as well as something you're getting done practically. So you invite everyone over, and you cook some food, and you're working, and everyone's hanging out and talking. It's a great time. Well, it's time to shear the sheep, so Absalom decides, let's get all the king's kids involved in this. And his plot is this is how he's going to kill his brother Amnon. Verse 24, then Absalom, he came to the king, to David, and he said, kindly note your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant. Hey, the sheep shearers are in town. We're ready for our big social celebration. Let's all kind of go out and celebrate. Verse 25, but the king said to Absalom, no, my son, let us not all go. Now, lest we be a burden to you. That would just be too big of a party. We don't want to intrude. Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. Then Absalom said, if not, please let my brother Amnon. Okay, not all of you. Can Amnon at least just come? Can he go with us? Verse 26, and the king said to him, why should he go with you? But Absalom urged him, so he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Sure, and if Amnon's going to go, all the boys might as well go. You guys go have a boys' weekend and have a good time, King David says. Well, verse 28, now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, watch now when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, let's get him really drunk, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him, and do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule, and they fled. Here's the deal. Yeah, we're going to get my brother out here. We're going to get him sauced. Then when I tell you to, I want you to go out and I want you to kill him. Don't be afraid. Now, what's interesting about Absalom now, there's some, does Absalom have a right to kill his brother? I don't know. Would I probably do it? Yeah. Would it make it right? Probably not right. You can very much relate with Absalom, but notice here that Absalom has his brother killed in a very similar way that David has Uriah killed, and that he has other people do the dirty work. And where does he learn this from? Right, Dad? So he goes, here's the plan. So they do they get their brother drunk, verse 29. So the servant of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons, they arose, and each one got on his mule, and they fled. They kill Absalom, or they kill Amnon, but then the rest of the king's sons are like, uh-oh, they're afraid that this is like an assassination attempt on all of David's kids. They hop on their mules, and they get out of Dodge. Now, as Amnon is now dead because of the sin that he did with his sister Tamar, it reminds me of what James chapter 1, starting in verse 14, tells us. James 1:14 says, "But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and entices. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is full grown, it brings forth death." And we see this fulfilled in the life of Amnon. It started with an idea. It started with an enticement. And he entertained that lust, and he acted upon it in sin. And then the sin was full grown, and ultimately it brings forth death in his life. And now we see that one of David's sons have killed one of his other sons. And if you remember what was told to David last week in chapter 12, he said, the sword will not depart from your house. And now we see the sword starting to be swung. So this is definitely a consequence of Amnon's sin, but even in a bigger picture, this is still part of the consequence of David's sin. Verse number 30 says, "And it came to pass, while they were on the way, the news came to David saying, Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." Now, this actually isn't true. He just killed one of them, but this is what the rumor gets back to David. Verse 31, "So the king arose, and he tore his garments, and he lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn." David's just heartbroken, thinking that all of his sons are now dead. Well, verse 32, "Then Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, answered and said, let not my lord suppose they have killed all the young men and the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar." Here's old Eddie Haskell back on the scene, right? And he says, no, not all your kids are dead, not all your sons, David, just Amnon. And the reason why Absalom killed him is because he laid with his sister Tamar. Well, guess where he got that idea, Eddie, right? Straight from you, Jonadab. That was your idea, the whole pretend you're sick thing. And now he's there bringing the good news that only one's dead and not all of them. Verse 33, "Now therefore, let not my lord the king take the thing to his heart to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead." Yeah, don't be deceived. You still got plenty of kids. It's just the weird one that died. Verse 34. "Then Absalom fled, and the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him." Absalom looks up, and there's people after him. Why? Because there's just been an assassination on one of the king's sons by the other king's son. They don't know what's going on. They're coming after Absalom. They don't know the background of the story. Verse 35, "And Jonadab said to the king, Look, the king's sons are coming, as your servant said, so is it." The boys are coming home. Verse 36, "So it was as soon as he had finished speaking that the king's sons indeed came, and they lifted up their voices and they wept, and also the king and all his servants wept very bitterly." They're all mourning the death, and man, we made it out alive, and there's just a lot of drama going on right now. Verse 37, "But Absalom, he fled, and he went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Gersha, and David mourned for his son every day." Absalom gets out of there. He goes to the region there, the region where the king of Gersha is. Now, why would he do that? Because this is where his mom is from. This is where David found Absalom's mom. If you remember when he fled there in 1 Samuel 27, David picks up another wife there from the king of Gersha, the daughter of the king of Gersha, and that was the mother of Absalom and Tamar. So when Absalom is in trouble, he goes to the place where his grandpa is the king from his mom's side. So he flees here and he's hiding out because no doubt he's afraid people might be after him. Verse 38, so Absalom, he fled and he went to Gersha, and he was there for 3 years. He lays low for 3 years in this area. Verse 39 gets interesting. It says, and King David, he longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. For 3 years, Absalom is hiding out. David mourns the death of Amnon, but at the end of the day, he's able to come to grips with it over these 3 years. And now, David's heart is longing to be reunited with Absalom, but Absalom is living away in another place. They're not talking because of this drama that's taken place in the family. And the weird part is that neither of them are together. Neither of them are talking, even though we know that David's desire is for Absalom. And I would make a pretty strong argument that Absalom would like to be reunited with David as well, but they're not. They're estranged because of some drama that happened in the family, even though if they both would just get over their pride and talk, they wish they could do Thanksgiving dinner together again. And that's how family works, right? Yeah, something happens, feathers get ruffled, get out of here, I just thought of a good story. So the other night, me and Josh we didn't accidentally, we did scare Taylor on purpose. And sometimes when you scare people, they just say irrational things. Yeah, I'm moving out of here, he says. And he didn't, which is good because he's not a prideful person. But if he wanted to hold a grudge, he could have said, I'm moving out. What we did is he was coming home one night, and we were just getting ready to go to bed. And he's pretty routine-atic. He has this routine. So when he comes home, he brushes his teeth and he goes to bed. So Josh goes, we'll pretend like we're asleep, the house is off. And Josh goes, I'll just sit on the toilet, not like dressed, but I'll just sit on the toilet with the light off. And then when he comes into the bathroom to brush his teeth and turns the light on, he'll see me there, and he's thinking we're asleep. So sure enough, he does it, and Taylor just freaks out. I'm going to move out here. The point is, Taylor could have very easily took that terrible thing that was done to him, just completely uncalled for. He could have took that thing and moved out and packed up his stuff and got out of here and quit coming to church and say, I no longer want to be friends with Hagen. And the weeks and the months and the years would go by, and we could start to want to reunite again, but we wouldn't because we're both prideful. But that's not how this story ends, and that's not how this story is going to end either. But that's how some stories do end. Some stories, particularly between parents and kids, and sometimes they choose different paths in different ways, and it's very easy to get in your ways and to, all I want is for, my kids to bring my grandkids over for Christmas, but I can't because 15 years ago I told them I never wanted to see him again because of the stupid thing he did. My advice is get over it. Life is short. Get over it. And we're going to see that David and Absalom, they'll get over it. Now, Absalom's going to turn into not the best guy. He's going to make some more bad choices, but he gets rid of his perverted brother, so that's good news. But let's pray, and we'll end this story tonight, and this is quite a chapter indeed, so I'm glad you came. Let's go to the Lord. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for your word, Lord, and it is living, God, it is powerful, and God, it is real. And Lord, this chapter particularly tonight is one that is not necessarily a go-to chapter to maybe read or do your devotions in the morning on or teach on a Wednesday night for sure. But God, this is why it's so valuable for us to want to be people that just want to go chapter by chapter and verse by verse through your word so that we can be exposed to all of your word, even the super messy and weird and sinful and gross parts that are recorded in it, because God, we learn so much from this chapter. Lord, when it comes to lust in our own lives and entertaining those thoughts, and just how far it can take us, Lord, if we choose to not take those thoughts captive like your word tells us to do, if we choose to not flee from those things and pursue righteousness and love and people who have pure hearts, God. So I pray that if there's areas in our lives right now, Lord, that would be what the world is offering us, Lord, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. God, that you would give us wisdom to flee away from that, Lord, to pursue better things, Lord, if there's thoughts in our minds that have been kind of running wild, God, I pray that we'd be able to take those thoughts into captivity. Lord, that by your help and your Spirit, we'd be able to cage up those things, Lord, so that they're not running wild, and so that sin doesn't produce, so that desire doesn't produce sin, and sin doesn't produce death, Lord, in our lives. God, we thank you for your word. God, we thank you for this evening. Jesus, in your name we pray. Amen.